Honorable Men Discord, Respect Jones. Let's talk about it. 50 Cent was on Cameron's podcast when Cameron asked him about the time when 50 Cent had Jim Jones performing with him on stage. And 50 Cent also had Jim Jones on, I believe, The Basement, Rap City in The Basement. And Jim Jones came out to support. But so Cameron asked him a question about that time, and this was 50 Cent's response. Check it out.
So when Ballin' took place, and I'm looking and I'm going, oh, he having a moment. That's the Lloyd Banks. It's Lloyd Banks thing. He wanted that. He was watching them be that, like Mace be that, and Cam be that, and looked at, and it was finally he had one.
Mm-hmm.
And I just looked, and I knew I just took the shot, Murder, to see, because I wasn't sure he was gonna go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, we like Jimmy better than you anyway, Cam. Then you gotta watch to see how he responds. And then when you see, he like, oh shit, he really like that. Hey, give me this, get me Jimmy. Yeah, tell him we want him. We want you at the show, Jimmy. Yeah, but that was one of those things I just threw it out and see what. And then when he bit to it, because it was like he was having a moment that not sure that was going to ever happen again.
So Jim Jones was on a recent interview on a channel called Respectfully, and the host asked Jim Jones a few questions about the time he was performing with 50 Cent and how that came about, and this was Jim Jones' response.
You never clear shit up, and we never hear your side of the story. Cam was like, I thought we could pull it together. Next thing I know, I see Jim performing with 50.
That nigga ain't think nothing. He could pull nothing together. He couldn't do nothing with me. He couldn't tell me nothing, nigga. Like, let's not get this shit twisted. Like, nigga, nobody could tell me nothing, nigga. I was my own boss. I did what I did as a fucking soldier, because I was a soldier, nigga. You heard? I had the soldiers, niggas. Niggas didn't tell me nothing. You heard? I did what I wanted to do. I seen the shit wasn't going right, so I started doing what Jim Jones needed to do for Jim Jones, because the nigga that was supposed to be the Don wasn't taking care of the capo. Started feeling like the Gotti movie, you heard?
So Respect Jim Jones is really the age-old story of people's journey in life. So when I highlight something, it's not necessarily about that person per se. It's about the lifestyle and the experience that person went through. So with Jim Jones, I felt like the interview on Respectfully, if you haven't seen it, definitely give that podcast a listen. Great interview. There's a lot of things that was mentioned within that interview where you could really respect the intelligence of Jim Jones. But what I got from the interview is the age-old story of people you know from your past trying to keep you in the past. And you might say, what do I mean by that? And this might resonate with many of you watching. It could be family members, it could be friends, it could be people from your old neighborhood. People tend to keep you boxed in. And I was going to do an episode on avoiding the box. And what I mean by that is Jim Jones in that interview for Respectfully, he spoke about how in the beginning of Dipset forming, many of the members stayed at his, I believe, his grandmother's house or something like that. It started from there. It blossomed and it took off. But he brought that up not to put all the members in a box, but he brought that up to point out the fact that he understood back then the importance of playing a role. He knew he wasn't as talented as some of the other members, particularly Cameron and Jules Santana. Well, I believe Jules Santana came on a little bit later, but he understood the importance of just playing his role. So he was man enough at that time and at that age to make the decision to play his role and be patient. But what he spoke about in that interview was, as the momentum started to build and Cameron started to take off, I guess a lot of the promises that were spoken about, a lot of the promises that were made behind closed doors weren't necessarily kept. And he realized at some point in time that it was necessary for him to worry about his brand and figure things out on his own, because he couldn't rely on Cameron. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because as a man in general, men in general should be trying to figure it out for themselves. It's okay to get some pointers and some tips, but if you're going to be waiting for another man to lend you a hand, you're going to be waiting a long time. Well, in respect to both Jim Jones and 50 Cent, 50 Cent was asked the question by Cameron. 50 Cent didn't go on Cameron's show looking to stir up any type of controversy. So that's one. Two, Jim Jones on the Respectfully podcast was asked a few questions from the host. So neither 50 Cent or Jim Jones went on podcasts looking to stir up any issues. The issue I have with Cameron is Cameron has a history with Jim Jones. Whether their friendship is the same as it was from the past or not, there was no need for Cameron to stir up an old issue. You know, they did their concert, the Dipset versus the Lox, and even if that was just business, the issue I have with all of this is the need to somewhat clown or attempt to clown Jim Jones. This is why the title's Respect Jones. And as I said before, this is not just about Jim Jones. This is things that occur with everyday people, not just entertainers. So I couldn't watch both interviews and not form an opinion on what I thought about it. And I thought it was very tasteless that Cameron chose to invite 50 Cent on his show and ask him a question about the past. And this goes back to the Angel Reese episode that I did on being apologetic. We as minorities have the tendency to stay in the past. We have the tendency to try to keep others in the past. We don't respect the fact that Jim Jones is a grown man with gray hairs in his beard and on his head. Cameron didn't respect that. Cameron wants to keep Jim Jones as his understudy. And the interview resonated with me because I myself went through a situation like that with a childhood friend recently, particularly Christmas Eve. And people tend to keep you in the past. People that haven't been around you for a few years because maybe they moved to another state, another country, or whatever, or what have you. Maybe they just, through just your own personal growth and having a family of your own, you get out of touch with certain people. But those individuals keep the memory that they have of you and the decade and the time. They keep that in their mind subconsciously. So no matter when they see you, they think you're still that person from the past. And if this resonates with anyone that's watching, please watch the Respectfully interview with Jim Jones. Excellent interview. I get nothing from shouting that guy out. He's doing phenomenal on his page. And that was episode 1 for that podcast. So shout out to the host. I don't know the host by name, but shout out to him and shout out to everybody who's doing their thing on YouTube. But the point is, people tend to keep you in a box. There could be separation of time with friends and family, and then you may meet up at a barbecue. And have you ever experienced a friend or family member speaking to you as though you're that same person from decades ago? That's what I felt was going on within the interview that Cameron had with 50 Cent. Cameron was speaking on something that was old, and he's speaking about someone who's a grown man that's been doing business successfully on his own outside of Dipset. Outside of Dipset, Jim Jones has been doing well for himself. And I was speaking about this with a friend of mine that I speak to time and time, off and on, because he's living in another state. But the friendship, is still solid. But we were speaking on Jim Jones and how impressed we are by the fact that the guy could really rhyme. You know, he's putting in that work. He has a lot of songs that I actually like. So much work to the point where I believe my friend said he's better than Cam, you know? And if you disagree with that, see me in the comments. But Jim Jones really doesn't care for Mace, and he has his own personal reasons for that. But he, within the interview for Respectfully, even went as far as saying, you know, he wished both of them the best. He's like, he hopes they make $1 trillion. And it didn't sound like he was playing around when he said that. He was sincere, you know. But just by Cameron asking 50 Cent the question he asked him, Cameron doesn't have that same love, in my opinion, for Jim Jones. Because if you had love for him and respect for him, you wouldn't even mention him in the interview. Because Cameron could have made the interview about 50 Cent's endeavors today, you know, which he did touch on 50 Cent's Vegas residency. He could have spoke about the Shreveport studios. He could have spoke about anything he wanted to speak about. But no, instead he chose to ask him a question about the past and Jim Jones. So now we have the whole back and forth going on. Jim Jones responded to 50 Cent and Cameron's interview. And now 50 Cent caught wind of Jim Jones's response on the Respectfully podcast. And so now 50 Cent has been trolling Jim Jones via Instagram, putting up posts from an old conversation that Jim Jones had with one of his affiliates that is now doing time. And it's just silly. You know, at the end of the day, and this is what I try to convey within my videos. Not all the time, but depending on the topic. There's more than enough money for everyone. The negativity is unnecessary. At the end of the day, what are we doing? Do we ever take a time out to think about the fact that all this stuff that we're chasing and we're hoarding, we're accumulating, cars, clothes, there's celebrities with more than one house. None of this is coming with us when our day is done. We're chasing, hustling. And I'm not saying don't pursue your dreams. Be successful, whatever that looks like for you. But it's just ridiculous when you're watching grown men. And I'm not blaming Jim Jones. And I'm not blaming 50 Cent. I'm not blaming Cameron. Because here's the thing. We grew up in a culture and like I said before, neighborhoods that this is all we know sometimes. We just know the competition. We just know the little bit of hate for one another. You know, this has been passed down. It's generational ignorance, you know, and it's just one of those things where it's like 50 is doing his thing in film. He's doing his thing in television. Again, he didn't go to Cameron's podcast with the intentions of talking down on Jim Jones. Cameron was the one that asked that question, which is why I said Cameron shouldn't have asked that question, in my opinion. Jim Jones, the same as 50. Jim Jones went to the Respectfully podcast. He wasn't the one who went there with any intentions. The host asked the questions of Jim Jones. But all I'm trying to say is at the end of the day, there's more than enough money out there for Cam to eat, 50 Cent to eat, and Jim Jones to eat. And everyone else associated with their entourages. Plenty of money. And when it's all said and done, we're all going to get old. Doesn't matter how much money you make, you're all going to get old. We are all going to get old, I should say. And that's that. So rather than being successful and making good money and spending your time talking about the next man, just focus on your projects and salute everybody on their own personal journey. That's just a suggestion. That's just my opinion. You know, if you disagree, I'll see you in the comments. This may resonate with some of the viewers, but what I want you all to know is it's okay to grow. life has shown you nothing else, it's shown you that it's about growth and not latching on to the past. It's in your best interest to grow, which is why you go through life in phases. You know, you go through elementary school, junior high school for some, high school. If you further your education, you go to college. You're never hanging on to one period of time. You're forced to move and progress. That's just how life is, whether you like it or not. You could stay in the same neighborhood and act the same as you were acting when you were younger. But the fact of the matter is you're getting older. And with aging, there's responsibility that's required. Now, you could choose not to adhere to those responsibilities, but it's going to happen regardless. You're not going to stay young forever. Which is why sometimes a lot of us are trapped in that mentality of keeping it real because we're from certain neighborhoods and backgrounds. What does that really mean? The goal has always been to elevate and to pass the jewels or the life lessons that you've learned down to those younger than you and behind you. That's always been the goal. But many of us sometimes through ignorance want to remix it, and we want to be forever young and continue doing the same things we were doing when we were younger, and then wondering why we don't progress and move forward in life. I hope I'm not digressing, and I'm hoping this isn't something that many of you don't understand or can relate to. But just know that at the core of all of this, between Cameron asking 50 Cent the question he asked him, it's basically at the core of all of that was a lack of respect for Jim Jones. Yes, you knew that guy from back when you guys were younger in Harlem, but that's a grown man right now. And this is why I encourage you all to watch that Respectfully podcast, because certain questions that was asked of Jim Jones, the way he answered it, I can tell he's a grown man. Now, some may say, oh, but Jim Jones in his videos, he doesn't act like he's a grown man. Look at the type of clothes he's wearing. He's still trying to be young. That's for another subject. Listen to the way that man responded to certain questions. It will surprise you. And that's what I appreciated about Jim Jones. And that's why I decided to do this episode. Because it's necessary for people to take time out and see the bigger picture. You can't expect to want success or deserve success if you got hatred in your heart. But that's enough preaching for me. Honorable Men Discord. Always a pleasure. Like, share, subscribe. Take care.